We get to see the maple trees, maple sugar and the maple leaves. We get the biggest wheat fields growing tall. In Canada, where we see the reversing falls. In Canada, we get to see them all.
Well, hello. So, since Trudeau announced last week that he's resigning as the Liberal Party leader and the Prime Minister once a new leader is elected, there's been a lot of speculation about who will replace him and how that process will play out. Since the rules for voting in a leadership election had to be redrawn, previously they permitted pretty much anybody to vote for a new leader, which might have been fine in other leadership elections, but in this case they're going to be actually voting for a temporary prime minister for at least 6 weeks until an election can be called.
Jeremy Sharon with the latest on this. Jeremy, good morning. Good to see you. Are there any new developments overnight, or can we expect any announcements today from potential Liberal leadership candidates?
Yeah, good morning. I think, no new names yet. The only two names we still have are two Liberal MPs, Chandra Arya and Frank Baylis. But now that we know more about the leadership race itself, the rules, fundraising, timelines, I think we can expect to start to see more names be announced throughout the day today, into the weekend, and in pretty short order. Some important things to note that have changed kind of overnight, and the new details that have been announced. March 9th is the first important date. That's when the Liberal Party will select its new leader. January 23rd is the second important date to keep in mind. That's the fundraising deadline. And the amount that candidates will have to fundraise to move forward in this leadership race has gone up significantly since the last time the Liberal Party held the leadership race. From $75,000 the last time, now to $350,000. That's in an effort to dissuade not so serious candidates and ensure that those that are moving forward in this leadership race are serious candidates that are able to secure that kind of fundraising in such a short period of time. The other big thing that the Liberal Party has done here has changed part of its constitution. Prior to this leadership race, in order to vote in a Liberal leadership race, you did not have to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent citizen. You know, international students were able to vote. Non-permanent citizens were able to vote. That is now changing. In this leadership race, you will only be able to vote if you are a permanent citizen or a Canadian citizen. So international students will not be able to vote, really strengthening those rules in an effort to avoid any kind of foreign interference. This was an area that had been identified for potential foreign interference in the foreign interference inquiry. So some significant changes to the Liberal Party of Canada's constitution, moving ahead with some of the rules in this leadership race.
After his announcement to step down, Parliament was prorogued until March 24th. And now that the New Democrat Party NDP leader Jagmeet Singh has joined in with Poilievre, the Conservative call for yet another vote of non-confidence. I think that's going to be 4 now in the Liberal government. They want to end prorogue early and call the Axe the Tax election, as he's been pushing it for so long now.
Ex-Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is calling on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to bring Parliament back and face him in the polls. In his first media appearance since Trudeau's resignation announcement, the top Tory says his party is ready for an election now. Jason Gaidola joins us live with more on this. Jason.
Good evening, Matt. Poilievre says domestic policies will need an overhaul in order for the country to be prepared to negotiate with the United States.
You know, the only person that would like the Canadian carbon tax to go to 61 cents a litre more than the NDP Liberals is President Trump.
In the midst of a potential trade war between Canada and the U.S., Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre believes an incoming Trump administration is taking notice about policies in Ottawa and is calling for an election now.
I'm calling on Justin Trudeau to do what he has the legal power to do. He can do it without his caucus supporting him. I'm calling on him to walk to Rideau Hall and announce that there will be an Axe the Tax election now.
From bumper stickers to political battles, Alberta's relationship with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has often been contentious.
Well, I'm a Western Canadian. I've always hated Justin Trudeau. I've hated the name.
Alberta's premier has been one of the loudest voices against the Prime Minister. Now, Premier Danielle Smith argues Monday's resignation doesn't go far enough.
We need an election so that whoever is in the chair has a 4-year mandate. And so when we go to negotiate with the United States, there's some certainty.
Smith is referring to a tariff pledge from incoming U.S. President Donald Trump. She believes the outgoing Prime Minister is being irresponsible and selfish by not calling an election.
The carbon tax is a big bone of contention, mostly for conservative provinces and parties, but there's if the Liberals were to elect someone like Mark Carney to run instead, who's already said publicly that the carbon tax has pretty much served its purpose and should be replaced with something else which would promote investment. Carney doesn't have the stain of the current Liberal cabinet, but neither has he held an elected office before. So who are some of the other candidates that could replace him? And can a new leader make a difference for the Liberals in a general federal election?
Being so far behind for so long, does the party think it can beat Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives simply by changing leaders?
You know, elections do matter. I'm a firm believer in that, but there's no data point over the last 2 years to suggest that simply changing leaders is going to erase a 20-point deficit. Liberals are realistic about this point, and what Liberals have been telling me is saying, had they had to run under Justin Trudeau, they're doing polling in their own ridings, and they know that they were facing a certain loss. 100 of them, 120 of them could have lost their seats, and they're thinking anybody's got to be better. Now, maybe 80 of them lose their seats, but for the party, it was the difference between being knocked all the way back to third spot in the House of Commons, maybe even the fourth spot. But with a new leader, Liberals believe that it's a realistic possibility they could be the official opposition, at least, in the next election. If there's some miracle, maybe they hold the Conservatives to a minority. But there's just about no Liberal I speak to that realistically thinks that in the next 3 months they could turn around their fortunes so significantly with just by changing a leader that they might overtake Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives.
Well, some had already expressed their interest in running. The first to actually announce was the relatively unknown Frank Baylis, a businessman and former MP who represented Montreal's Pierre Poilievre, who says he would stand up to President-elect Trump and protect Canadian jobs and Canadian industries. And many were disappointed after Dominic LeBlanc, the new finance minister, stated that initially that he would not seek the position, but some members are petitioning for him to change his mind due to overwhelming support for his candidacy.
With the race to replace Justin Trudeau and the push to get Dominic LeBlanc to change his mind and run for the top job.
Are you hoping Mr. Minister LeBlanc will reconsider?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Did you tell him that?
Yes, I did. He is highly respected amongst all of caucus, and I think of a lot of Canadians.
Dominic LeBlanc, should he change his mind?
He absolutely should. He has what it takes to beat Pierre Poilievre.
Do you think that there's enough of an effort to get him to reconsider running for leadership?
There's a lot of effort to do that.
So why are so many MPs calling for Minister LeBlanc to reconsider? Joining me now is Ontario Liberal MP Judy Sgro. Ms. Sgro, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here today.
Glad to have the opportunity.
Dominic LeBlanc has told the country no. You're asking him to say yes. What did he say to you when you asked him to reconsider?
That he'd reconsider. I think Dominic, frankly, brings all of the qualities to the table that we want. In addition to having a relationship with Mr. Trump and the U.S., I think he was the best person that we can possibly choose to move forward.
So he explicitly said to you that he would reconsider his decision to not run. Am I understanding you correctly there?
Yes, I was not the only one who had approached Dominic yesterday. There were at least a dozen of us who went up to him and said, why did you do that without at least talking to us, and so on and so forth. So As we left the meeting last night, he said yes, that he would reconsider his position. Now, I haven't heard from him today, but I would expect that he's giving it full consideration and talking with his family as well.
Okay, because I reached out to, I haven't spoken to Dominic LeBlanc directly, but you know how this works. There are people in his orbit in a moment like this that you speak with, and they were explicit to me that he is telling people he's not going to reconsider, and that the job he has to do as finance minister, intergovernmental affairs minister, and responsible for the border is just too much. But you're saying you and how many others were given a different message at this meeting or after this meeting yesterday?
There were a dozen of us, and then I know more. We're going to be encouraging him. I think he was quite surprised to see the amount of support he had in caucus, that he wasn't expecting to hear that. So I think that's had an impact on his decisions.
Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly at first suggested she would run, but has changed her mind for the good of the country. Another name familiar to Canadians is former BC Premier Christy Clark. The BC Liberals are not affiliated with any party at the federal level and is considered a free enterprise coalition made up of both federal Conservatives and Liberals. Yeah, the Liberals out west are not Liberals.
Christy Clark has described herself for years as a lifelong federal Liberal. When she was Premier of British Columbia, yes, she was a BC Liberal, but just so everyone understands, the BC Liberals not affiliated with the federal Liberals. They were a bit of a different political beast, a bit more to the right. And in order to vote in the Conservative leadership race, you have to renounce any other membership. Right? You can't be a member of another party. So despite being lifelong, she couldn't have been a federal Liberal if she was voting in this race, where she very publicly endorsed Jean Charest. So I had questions about how long this period of her life lasted. Let's listen to our exchange. You have called yourself a lifelong Liberal, but you voted in the last federal Conservative leadership race. That would have required you to cancel your Liberal Party membership in order to join the Conservative Party. How long were you a member of the Conservative Party, Christy Clark?
Never.
But you voted in the race, did you not?
No, I didn't. And I never got a membership, and I never got a ballot. What I did, though,
I will say, Christy Clark, we reached out to the Conservative Party, who told us, in fact, that your membership was canceled.
Oh, well, why don't they come out and show my membership or my ballot? They never sent me any of those, although I wouldn't put it past them to manufacture one of them.
Wow. We're going to get to that, come out and show it in a second. But I also, in regards to this interview, David, she went on to say in the interview that she called the Conservative Party numerous times to ask where her ballot was. And I said, well, wouldn't you have to be a member in order to expect a ballot from them? I asked if she canceled her Liberal Party membership. She said no. Her team now says that she was, in fact, not a registered Liberal when she supported Jean Charest.
Okay. So, all right. I'm a little...
Clark resigned from provincial politics in 2017, but has recently expressed an interest in the run to defeat Prime Minister Trudeau and has reportedly been learning French. Reminds me of Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, swearing to learn French before running for Prime Minister again. And one of the bigger kooks in the running is Chandra Arya of Ottawa, who would probably be better suited to the opposition side of the aisle as well. He says it's time for Canada to take full control of its destiny, and his government would make Canada a sovereign republic. He would lead a small, more efficient government with a cabinet selected on merit and not on DEI quotas. No matter who replaces Trudeau, it's unlikely that the Liberals will be able to retain power. In a general election, the Conservative Party would still have to face off against serious competition from the other parties, including the Liberals, the NDP, the Bloc Québécois, and the Green Party, of whom Elizabeth May has recently made headlines for her backlash speeches on the floor against Trump's comments about annexing Canada as a 51st state.
Before making public pronouncements that Wayne Gretzky should run for Prime Minister, give yourself or get yourself a briefing on the nature of parliamentary democracy, a Westminster parliamentary system and a constitutional monarchy where no one runs for prime minister. We have elections for members of parliament. We don't get to pick and choose among our billionaire friends for who gets a seat at the cabinet table. If they're not an elected member of parliament, well, Canadian system is different from that of the United States of America. I suggest that Mr. Trump find one of his grandchildren's school books and look at the year 1776, which may explain a few things to him about why our systems of government are different. I don't want to belittle Mr. Trump, but on the other hand, hey, Donald, have we got a deal for you? You think we want to be the 51st state? Nah, but maybe California would like to be the 11th province. How about it? California, Oregon, Washington, you've got geography in common with us. And not only that, we've already got a carbon trading system between California and Quebec. We've got some strong alliances on our west coast from British Columbia. There's been a lot of academic papers on the idea of Cascadia. So California, Governor Newsom, and Washington State, Jay Inslee, and newly elected Governor of Oregon, Tina Kotek. How about it? Want to put a referendum to your citizens? Because this is what you deal. Have we got a deal for you? This is what you get. Free health care. Universal free health care. No more one-year-olds who suddenly fall off the Medicaid list and their parents are in the news because they're trying to do a GoFundMe so they can get their daughter to a doctor. Universal free health care. And guess what? Those gun laws that your Congress is too afraid to pass because of the national gun lobby, we already got our strict gun laws. That's why we have the safest streets around the world, or at least in the United States, by the way, the most recent stats, 5.9 out of every 100,000 people is killed in a fatal gun incident versus 0.88 per 100,000 in Canada. That's because we have strict gun laws. California citizens, Oregon, Washington, safer streets. Here we already have good gun laws, and women have a right to an abortion under our universal health care system. But, we don't have to stop there. Donald, think about it. You could get rid of all these states that always vote Democrat. You know what else will take Bernie Sanders off your hands? Proud new Canadian citizen of the great province of Vermont. Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. We'd love to see you. Our maritime provinces already have deep, deep links and ties. Well, enough kidding around. But honestly, President Trump, get used to it. Canada is a sovereign nation full of, guess what? Proud Canadians. We're not jingoistic. We don't boast a lot. That's one of the things we kind of have in common with Jimmy Carter. We're not a big nation for braggarts and bullies. We actually like to think we're of service in the world. We could do better. We can always do better. But we love our country. And it's a country. It's a nation. And we do not aspire to be 51st state.
Well, a lot of Canadians are angry and blame Trudeau and his cabinet for any number of things and everything, but others admired him as a world leader figure, a diplomat, steady presence in troubled international times. The suffering economy here wasn't entirely his fault after COVID decimated world trade, and the global rise of the far right-wing so-called strongmen has emboldened even our polite versions of MAGA, like Pierre Poilievre, Ford, Danielle Smith, and others. But like a true Trudeau on his way out the door, he had an epic response to our American friends yesterday after attending the funeral of Jimmy Carter, a good family friend of his father Pierre's. He then gave a brief statement to the press in which he honored Jimmy, pretty much told Trump to F you about Canada joining the US, offered our assistance fighting the California wildfires, and stressed the impact of climate change on all of us.
Let's listen in live.
Situation catastrophique.
Let's take you live to Washington now, where Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is speaking to reporters. Let's listen in live.
Situation catastrophique. On est en train d'offrir beaucoup d'aide à la Californie. J'ai eu des échanges avec le gouverneur Newsom.
I've had exchanges with Governor Newsom. We're there with resources, with firefighters, and everything they need. Because we see just how alarming this situation is and serious. Obviously, a lot of conversations around the relations between Canada and the U.S. Allow me to highlight once again that Canada will never be a 51st American state. We are people who define ourselves in many ways, but Canadians quite simply like to define themselves as not American, and that will remain. I also had discussions with business leaders here in Washington. Jay Timmons of the National Manufacturers Association, Joshua Bolton from the National Roundtable of business people, to highlight just how we are doing big things together along the border, which is good for economic growth, good for business, good for workers and consumers in both countries, that we need to work together to avoid tariffs, unfair tariffs on Canadian products, so we can continue to not only benefit the workers on both sides of the border, but also be competitive with the whole world at a time where geopolitics requires strength in North America to work well with the world. So it was a good day, and we will continue to work hard.
Washington today. Obviously started with the funeral, the state funeral for President Jimmy Carter, who was not just a good friend to me and to my fathers, but especially a good friend to Canada. His leadership, his impact, his humanitarianism, his compassion, his service left a profound mark, not just on the United States, but on the entire world, and he remains an inspiration to all those who serve and lead.
He also appeared on CNN to speak further about the tariffs and why Canada is better than the States.
Trump has been needling you a bit, calling you Governor Trudeau, talking about making Canada the 51st state. Did you have any interaction with him today?
No, not today. But that's not going to happen. Canadians are incredibly proud of being Canadian. One of the ways we define ourselves most easily is, well, we're not American. There is such a depth of pride that's not actually an issue. What I think is happening in this is President Trump, who's a very skillful negotiator, is getting people to be somewhat distracted by that conversation, to take away from the conversation around 25% tariffs on oil and gas and electricity and steel and aluminum and lumber and concrete, and everything the American consumers buy from Canada is suddenly going to get a lot more expensive if he moves forward on these tariffs. And that's something that I think we need to be focusing on a little bit more.
Did the re-election of Donald Trump and this more direct confrontation with Canada over this issue play any role at all in your decision to resign as leader of your party and prime minister?
No, on the contrary. What we were able to do during the first presidency of Mr. Trump's was work together in a very challenging situation to come out with a very strong win-win in Canada-U.S. relations with the renegotiation of the USMCA. It is a great deal for both of our countries. We've seen trade grow, we've seen opportunities grow, we've seen wealth grow in both of our countries for workers, for businesses. We don't want them either. We do not want to see tariffs on our side. We do not want to see tariffs on your side. It's bad for people who have, for generations, made things together and been successful together to actually start creating barriers between economies like ours. Like, we have so many resources in Canada, more than our market can support, so we export them to our closest friend who can rely on them. It is a win-win for us. we would definitely respond, as we did years ago when President Trump put tariffs on steel and aluminum. We responded by putting tariffs on Heinz ketchup, on playing cards, on bourbon, on Harley Davidsons, on things that would hurt American workers. But we don't want to do that because it drives up prices for Canadians and it harms our closest trading partner. On trade, there's more that we can do, but we should be focused on making sure that we're replacing Chinese lithium or Chinese germanium or Russian titanium into American productions by relying on your closest and friendliest trading partner in Canada. We can be a strong supplier of things that the U.S. needs to compete around the world because we can do it together. Trudeau just...
Well, as a Canadian raised in Quebec while Pierre Trudeau was Prime Minister, I'd just like to say, fuddle-duddle! Baron Vaughan shits and pants in his fantasies of dominating the true north strong and free. I mean, that's the only way you can get into our country now that you're a convicted felon! Maybe if you ask us nicely, we'll give you a day pass. But only within certain restricted areas, and don't you dare stay 1 minute past your temporary visa permit.
Stay tuned for more on Political Drain Canadian Edition.
Follow us on all these things you see here, and our link tree is in the description. Maybe even get some merch.